Welcome to another episode of the Modern Hotelier. We're really excited to release this episode with Richard Valtr from Mews. David, what were some of your favorite takeaways?
Well, Richard's Richard. He's a visionary in our space, and it was very impressive to kind of hear his thoughts. And it really just shows why Mews is really become kind of one of the leaders in their space and in the industry.
I agree. I loved him talking about not only the guest experience, but the answer for what's next for Mews was probably my favorite answer of the whole interview. You can tell this guy is just determined to change the industry and he is ready to go. So he said a lot of same things that happened this year are going to happen next year. So we're going to continue to see a lot of growth and innovation from Mews. But enjoy the episode and let us know what you think.
Enjoy it. Welcome to the Modern Hotelier, the most engaged podcast in hospitality. I'm your host, David Millili.
I'm your co-host, Steve Carran.
And I'm the producer, John Boomhofer.
Steve, who do we have on the program today?
Yeah, David. Today we have on everybody's friend in hospitality, Richard Valtr. Richard is the founder of Mews, an entrepreneur and ex-hotelier with an extensive background in hotel investment and management. Mews is a hospitality management system that is a platform for the new era of technology. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Good.
Great. Happy to have you here.
All right, Richard. So we're going to start off. We're going to go through a couple sections. We're going to go through a lightning round, learn a little bit about your background and your career, and then jump into some industry topics. Sound good?
Yep.
All right. So what was your first job?
My first ever job, that was a bricklayer. My dad made me do it when I was kind of suspended from school for just doing really stupid stuff. And that's the first job that I remember. The other really, really annoying job was during my summer holidays coming back, and I'd have to do the graveyard shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. on the reception desk, always for about a good month or so of my summer holidays, which is like where my general hatred for the night audit comes from.
Yeah, I hear you. Definitely. What's something you wish you were better at?
Speaking without using filler words.
Okay. All right, good. What's a luxury you can't live without?
Is a phone a luxury? No. I guess it's actually subscription to all the different Substacks and all the different things that I end up reading, and an addiction to buying any kind of history books. And now I've been banned in my house from like if the Amazon package comes to the house, my wife just like throws it away.
All right.
Like no more.
What's a place you've never been to that you'd most like to go?
God, there's so many. I'd like to go to Hawaii. I'd really like to see it, and I'd like to go there. There's just so many places that I'd love to go. I'd love to go to Antarctica. I'd love to go to Egypt. But at the moment, it feels like it's Hawaii.
All right. Sounds good. All right. So if you had your own late night talk show, who would you choose as your first guest?
They have to be alive.
You can pick someone dead or alive. That's fine.
Yeah. I mean, with a dead person, it would be a pretty boring show.
Well, yeah.
Unless you're going to do the voices. But so alive, you could go like Barack Obama or like Elon Musk. But I think it's going to be this guy called Václav Smil, who's another fellow Czech, but lives in Canada and writes all these really interesting books about really big topics, like the energy transformation and things like that. So I think he'd be really, really interesting to speak to. And dead, I don't speak French, but I'd love to interview Napoleon.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Or like George Washington. He'd be, or like, no, actually Madison, James Madison. I'd kind of like interview him and give him like lots of constitutional questions.
That's a good one. All right, this is the last one for me in this section. If you had a time machine and you could go to the future or go to the past, which way are you going? And you have to pick a year that you go to. What year?
It's kind of Like, I feel like I'm primed for this answer just because of the fact that I was just on LinkedIn explaining why we, instead of our kind of mission, vision, and values, wrote a constitution. But I'd love to go to, what is it, 7087 or 7080, and go to the Constitutional Convention because, nobody was allowed to take notes and things like that. But I'd love to just sit through it.
Good answer. I like that. Yeah,
that
especially this time of year and what's going on in the States. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that was great, Richard. Great to hear those answers. Now we're going to get a little bit more into the personal side, where you grew up and what makes you tick. So you grew up in Prague, Czech Republic. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Even though I have this horrific speech impediment that makes me sound English.
So how did growing up in Prague shape who you are today?
I don't know. Like, I feel that I definitely have this kind of English side to myself and a Czech side to myself. Like, I really feel that all Eastern Europeans are like predisposed to love America. So that's also one thing when I moved over here 5 years ago. But I think it is that thing of, I was born still when it was Czechoslovakia, still under communism. Not to say that the first, 6 years of my life were that memorable that I could really speak, fluently on the difference between the two things. But, being so close to it does give you a perspective on what those two systems of government actually kind of are. And I think that whilst you have, in Europe, there's been a bit of a fall from grace over the past 30 years. That's not really true in Eastern Europe, where it just feels like actually we've just been growing through the last 20 or 30 years. And I think that that's kind of similar in the Western world. And I think that that's also why the kind of the culture of growth that I try and maintain within Mews, but we try and also see in terms of where we'd like to go. I think that that's also something that I like about living in the US. But I think that definitely shapes me. I think that, having a very, very strong family life, being raised by two very distinct personalities, and my mother and my father, also makes me want to kind of aspire to be as good of a father, because my wife is a great mother. So that's difficult to compete with.
All right. So you went to University College London. How did you end up there, and what did you study when you were at university?
So I did philosophy, and I also had history of science, but I was really interested in it. I studied that. My father wanted me to become an actuary because he worked in insurance for pretty much all of his life. My first thought was that I was going to become a writer when I was older, and so I had all of these things that I was just interested in at the time, and so I'd probably choose something different. But I feel like the idea of choosing the thing that you're going to do for the rest of your life at the age of 18 is like totally anachronistic.
Right.
So, yeah.
For sure. Agree. Exactly. I think most of us would go back and change, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But
I do like structural engineering now or something.
Yeah, there you go. Whole different direction. So
like something like really difficult and really like you need 3 years to do it. Like, I just feel like I actually get more out of reading philosophy books now than I definitely did then.
Sure. That makes sense. So, you're in hospitality now. What makes you passionate about changing hospitality in today's day?
I think the two things that really drive me is, one, I just feel that this should be, and especially now that we're kind of entering the age of AI, hospitality should be the biggest industry on the planet. It already is a huge employer, and I think it should be a growth industry. It's kind of been one of these kind of slow and steady. It's kind of always had good margins, relatively ekes out like relatively okay growth all the time. But I think if you think about what it represents, the fact that it's this kind of apex of what real estate is, every single hotel is a mixed use real estate site in itself. And I think what we think of is, the idea that when you come into a hotel, you're actually, you as a guest are in someone's care for a 24-hour period. Currently, hotels tend to only monetize that 9-hour period or the 8-hour, 9-hour period that somebody's in the room. And I just feel that there's so much that you can do there. And I think that also there is so much scope to make other forms of real estate more hotel-like, whether it's real estate, whether it's offices, and that idea of people wanting to segment themselves into whether it's memberships or whether it's communities or other forms of kind of loyalty agglomerations, and then that coupled with the fact that experiences just seem to be more and more highly valued and seem to be one of those things that as soon as anyone breaks out of the middle class, they just want to go and travel, and there's almost no ceiling on the amount of travel you will do the richer you get as you kind of go up that curve. So I feel from all of those things, if you think of everything to do with machines and AI as being fundamentally deflationary because they will do all of those things themselves,
Yep.
then the kind of the human industry of hospitality should be kind of inflationary to balance it out, because we should have more money from the kind of the drudgery in order to actually kind of spend on experiences and things like that. So I think that's my bull case for hospitality, and I get really, really animated and really excited about making that happen.
I was just watching but it was actually an English gentleman on YouTube, but he was talking about how if the United States took the approach that Europe takes in mandating pretty much that you have 4 weeks of holiday, that what a tremendous impact that would have on the economy and people changing their habits and spending more and actually traveling more, whether it be especially within the country, obviously helping that economy. But I thought that was just a really interesting thing.
What I think is really interesting is that from the stats that we can see, Americans are definitely traveling more. They're traveling way more overseas, and you can see that in the passport numbers, basically. You can also see that in all of those things. So I think that whilst Americans don't like to take holidays as much as Europeans, right, I don't think that actually the amount of travel days is, it seems to be exploding. And I think it exploded during COVID, and the more, times that we're able to actually kind of work from anywhere, whether it's working from anywhere or working from holiday, it's like, I feel that more nomadic lifestyle is actually becoming completely normal. And and again, what I think contributes to that bull case, that Americans have kind of figured out how to have holidays even whilst they're not taking as many holiday days off.
Right. It's true.
Agree. Well, that's great. Now we're going to learn about a little bit more about industry insights and a little bit what's going on with Mews. So your dad was a programmer and hotel developer. Did that play a role into you starting Mews?
So it's actually, my father was the programmer who then went to work for an insurance company. My mother was a sociologist, a PhD, who then went to become a hotel developer or property developer.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So the kind of, the mix is within me. I'm not sure if it also works out for the programming and sociology part, but it definitely works out for the programming and the hotel development. So that, I think both of those things really, really colored me. As I said, those experiences of being in or around hotels and working, especially on the front office, and really, thinking about what is, then maybe it's a little bit of that kind of philosophy infusion into it, which is, what is the actual work when you're at a hotel? So I would always think about it from the perspective that I didn't understand why I was there working that graveyard shift, right, when the actual work was, welcoming the people at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. when they were just, arriving, welcoming them in, telling them more about the city, telling them more about the experiences, doing the kind of the human work of hosting, what I think is really high value, positive work. And then just, from from midnight onwards, just sitting there as a glorified security camera, doing like sitting and waiting for something to happen. Nothing would happen, and then clicking a couple of buttons and just waiting for the night audit to run. And I feel like that is not human work, and that shouldn't need somebody to to forego 7 hours of sleep or whatever it is during a fairly kind of unnatural time. I feel like there are so many jobs within hospitality that are just done because you're relying on cheap labor that we should try and completely do away with and figure out what are technological solutions to those problems so that we can really focus on, those 4 hours that you spend with those guests. How do you make them memorable? How do you make them truly positive? How do you make sure that the customer who's actually come into your hotel gets the most out of them, that you're upselling rather than, telling them what time breakfast is and where the elevators are, and doing those types of things. So I feel it's, changing those discussions, changing the purpose of what we actually have, and celebrating certain things which are endemic to hospitality, whether it's placemaking, the idea of hosting, the idea of curating experiences. Those for me feel like very, very high value human jobs that humans are uniquely great at. If you see somebody with your own eyes that's having a bad day, you can recognize it. You don't need facial recognition or,
Right.
Computer vision for it. Basically, it's something that humans can do. And the form of a human, basically like asking another person for help. It feels weird when we're kind of this thing, but like those are real valuable services and real valuable kind of resources that you're actually kind of sharing with yourself. And I think we should figure out a way and a model to properly price those, rather than thinking that it's just one service of a 12-hour shift, basically.
That makes sense. So building off of that, what are some significant trends you're seeing with your customers, and how is Mews poised to really help them with these new trends?
I think there's so many different trends, like all the way from contactless, which became the thing during the pandemic, but I think it was very much kind of the whole industry was going in that direction. And I think it's mainly just to do with the fact that we all have smartphones and we all want to do things on our smartphones. We don't really actually kind of want to be configuring our trips, through a conversation. We want to just be able to kind of do that on our smartphones, essentially kind of write down all of the instructions that we want, personalize that trip to the best of our abilities, and then just go from there. And I think that's something that Mews kind of started off with. We started off more as a guest management application. We only built the PMS basically because there was no system that had the extensive APIs that we were looking for. But I think that's really kind of one huge trend. The second is, I think, what I talked about before. So we've always had these very strange architectural things in our system. So we don't look at the room or the folio that's attached to a room as the base of the system. We think of it as the customer themselves. And that leads into, how you're then thinking about loyalty, how you're thinking about memberships, things like that, and thinking that, even a small hotel deserves to have its own loyalty scheme. So really having that kind of CRM-centric view is really, really important. And again, that's something that I think more and more hoteliers are really excited about. And then the third aspect is this idea of atomizing all of the different spaces. So if the room is no longer the kind of the charging unit, well, what is it? Well, it's actually part of that service. It's part of that 24-hour experience that you're doing. And so maybe in a one-star hotel, that is the only service that you can really kind of offer because you have no other services there. But if you have a 5-star hotel, you've got lots of different amenities that cover for X amount of hours. So you might think about it as a kind of 18-hour experience because you've got, 2 hours for dining, you've got 2 hours as a gym. Basically, you might also have a pool, which you might kind of like lays out for 3 hours. And that overall actually kind of makes that experience. So you should be thinking about, how to actually show that customer journey in a way that makes the most amount of money for the hotel, but also kind of creates those types of memorable experiences that you can have as a guest that then bind you to that place, that create that kind of loyalty to come back. And then when you extrapolate that over a brand perspective and you think about, well, how does that then play into a 365-day experience, or for example into a lifetime of those types of connections? I think that's what we like to think about. So we rolled out the idea of space time a couple of years ago, and what's interesting is that we always thought like, oh, it'll be meeting rooms and things like that are being kind of sold through it. The number one service that we see is, for example, parking. So the amount of unused equity that is in hotels that can be monetized, that should be monetized, that even if you put a simple booking engine on your homepage, just things start to get booked. I think that's amazing, and the fact that we've been able to kind of create more and more kind of incremental dollars for hotels, that's something that I'm incredibly proud of. Those, I would say, are the kind of the biggest trends. But you guys are the experts, so like, there's probably like 30 others that I'm not even kind of touching on.
Well, that was great. I mean, usually when we talk about trends, this comes up, which I'm going to ask you next. One of the biggest trends we've seen this year is AI. How the industry is figuring out how to use it. Do you think AI, or how are you seeing AI impact the guest experience?
Like, I think what's nice is that the one AI use case that most companies have figured out is the one that's used in just being able to kind of access a knowledge base and be able to conversationally use it, or conversationally be able to kind of respond. And I think that when you think about, so for example, we have an AI powered chatbot for our hotel users, because most of the time we were getting kind of how-to questions, how do I do this in Mews? How do I do this? And when you just have somebody who can just respond to those types of questions and, go 5 levels deep in a very nice conversational way, not in the old chatbot kind of style way of, press 1 if you want this option or click on this, but it's just normal conversation. I think that is a use case that I feel is pretty well worn. I think the next ones are going to be, for us, it's, for example, the idea of being able to talk to reports or having reports talk to you. I don't know if you've seen, but like one of my favorite features that I discovered last week was, I think Google Notebook will create a podcast for you from every single PDF that you can upload into it. And so if you prefer to, utilize, learn things through the medium of interesting podcasts, which I think a lot of us do, it can just create a podcast with very believable voices being able to narrate what is in that PDF if you just can't be bothered to actually kind of to read it. And I just like, it's all of these different use cases that I think are just really, really exciting, interesting. And I can't wait to see where they go. But I think a lot of the conversational stuff on the guest side, a lot of the ways that we think of data, actioning that data, making sure that it's actually useful and kind of prompting everyone in the hotel. We have this concept of user disengagement at Mews. So the idea is that, don't make anyone sit in front of a screen. And so if you can deliver the kind of the prompt to, what's the next best action basically to a receptionist, or what's the best way to kind of instantly recognize a guest, understand that they've, been a loyalty member for forever, that this isn't the first time that they're actually coming to your hotel. Those are the kind of the holy grail moments. And I feel like they're basically here. So we don't really need to kind of like wait that much longer. And there's going to be so many more of those things coming. But I just feel at this point, it's a huge acceleration for the productivity. And the only bad thing is that, once it gets let out of the bag, once you go to an AI assisted hotel where essentially like, somebody is kind of using that more co-pilot perspective, every other hotel experience will start feeling a little bit cheaper in comparison.
Sure. Absolutely.
That's a great answer. So you started to touch on it before. Hotels, as you were saying, are kind of just so focused on heads and beds and room revenue. what else should they be doing to maximize revenue potential? And again, I know it's tough going from a 2-star to a 5-star, but maybe for that 3 to 4-star property, what are some things that you think they should be looking at doing?
I think the first thing that they should be actually doing is just asking their guests what they like doing, like even having a map of their own property. So the way that I see it, like, a 2-star hotel is never going to employ a huge legion of concierges the way that a 5-star hotel might. But the idea of understanding why it is that people come to your hotel, what it is that they're trying to do there. Are they just sleeping there because they have to catch a flight the next morning? Are they going there because it's a good halfway house? Do they like the pancakes at the next door's IHOP? Like, whatever it is, I think it's shocking that hotels don't know that this is the role that they play within that 24-hour experience, or 16-hour if most people are there for just one day, or 72-hour experience. And I think that the first part is really actually kind of understanding the data around what it is and why it is that cohorts of your customers are coming to your hotel. So being able to actually map out those customer journeys is the first part. And then thinking about, well, how can we, play a role in the convenience of that experience? So if they're going to a local restaurant because it's got, a local delicacy or something like that, is there a way that you can reserve a couple of tables there? Yeah. Is there a way that you can guarantee that? I think people tend to kind of go like, oh, everything should be tech. Yeah. And I kind of go like, no, like everything in hotels should be human first. And then you should think about, how can the tech help you scale it? But you should really be thinking about, okay, these fundamental things of, we are a homepage, or we are a place that somebody kind of has to come back to all the time. If you think about it from a kind of tech perspective, when you click on that home button, you go there. Well, what's the next button that you click? And I think hotels don't have this perspective basically to understand, well, what is the next thing that somebody is going to do once they click on that homepage, basically, and they come back, to sleep, or they come back to kind of, have a shower in the middle of the day. And understanding that journey and how we can be a little bit more helpful, how we can be a little bit more useful, that will actually create the most amount of monetization moments for us.
Agree, 100%. So last question here from us, but Mews has had a heck of a year. You guys have had 2 rounds of funding. A few weeks ago, you guys just raised another 100 million. You've achieved unicorn status, 3 acquisitions. You held your 5th Mews Unfold. What is next for Mews?
The same. I just feel like every single year it gets bigger, better, and I'm still as dissatisfied about where we are. And it's great. Like, I feel like we're doing really good things, but I think that, the product needs to get better. We need, to really, really understand how to drive real profit for our hotels. I think that what we always think of is, we want everyone to think of Mews as a competitive advantage. We want them to feel that they are in a collective or a community of people that care about this industry, that care about this industry becoming the biggest growth industry, that understand that they have a partner who's by their side, who's just as ambitious for their industry. Because if we as a community can help grow this industry, then it means that everyone gets bigger, everyone gets better. So I just feel like there's so many different things that we can do, so many different ways that we can grow. So yeah, so it'll be quite boring. It'll be more of the same, just bigger.
I love that. I love that. So we've been asking you questions this whole time. We're going to turn the tables and we're going to let you ask us a question.
Nice. So I'll ask, so what is the difference between a hotelier and a modern hotelier?
Great question. David, you want to go or should I?
Yeah, my interpretation is I think if you are a modern hotelier, you're someone who embraces technology and doesn't fear it. And I think that's what I've tried to preach. That's what I've tried to preach to the industry, whether I'm talking to somebody at high tech or I'm on an HSMI panel. And it's, we kind of have this industry of fear. You said it great. And I agree with you. Human touch first, human interaction. But how do you leverage technology to take away the mundane tasks, the night audits, all these things where, I always use the example. I checked into a hotel in London. They had a self-serve kiosk. I just wanted to get to the bar. I checked myself in, didn't interact with anybody. But when I got to the bar, had a great conversation with the bartender, and there was a couple, servers, and that was great for me. And so that hotel had the trust in their employees versus fearing that the technology was going to take something away. So to me, that's the embracing technology is what the modern hotelier is.
I'm on that same note. It's finding out, being open to change and open to how you're going to increase the guest experience at the end of the day. Is that through technology, or is that through more of a personal touch? How can we incorporate more of these experiences into the stays? It is abundantly clear through all the studies that have been done that hotel or that guests are looking more towards experiences with their hotel stays than anything. We've seen this with, people traveling to go see Taylor Swift in Europe, and that's their one vacation, and the economy in that city skyrockets. So I think it's embracing kind of, I don't want to steal the whole technology thing, but embracing that new technology and really understanding your guests and how you can make the best experience possible for, like you said, whatever time they're in your hotel, whether that's 1, 2, 3 days. So I think that's kind of my answer on that one.
Nice.
But that was great. So last question on our end. John, our producer, has been listening the whole time. So we're going to have him ask you one more question before we get you out of here.
So it's really cool to listen to you talk about how you're helping hoteliers kind of look toward the future and grab some of those opportunities to monetize like the full 24-hour experience. And then that kind of dichotomy with what you're talking about at the beginning, your love for history. I'm curious, is there anything that when you're reading history or biographies or whatever you like to read, is there anything that you've learned or taken from those that really impact how you're innovating or how you're thinking about what you're doing at Mews?
It's interesting. It's always like the last conversations are the things that stick in your mind. But I was talking to somebody, Stripe, another kind of tech company. Yeah. I was talking to the founders there, and we were just talking about how the only real analogy, and I don't know if it's like a good analogy, but that really, really tends to stick from history is war, and how everyone has this vision of being like Alexander the Great. You kind of come in, you've got this like amazing piece of technology, which was technically invented by his dad, but the lances, and then you use that and you go over and like you basically kind of steamroll an entire continent, and you basically kind of do it, and you do it really quickly, and then that's it. But that's not really how most companies are built, and that's not how. There's like OpenAI, which is, those kind of things. There's like Facebook. You have so many of those, monumental shifts in either consumer behavior or technology. But most of the time, most of the building process for a company is a grind, and it feels like a long campaign or a long war. In which you need to utilize all the different types of tactics, all the different types of ambushes. You need to go from guerrilla warfare in certain things to amassing a huge army, being able to kind of to utilize it, like the end stages basically of the Second World War, when the Russians were kind of steamrolling through to Germany and things like that, and those things. And it's interesting how that ends up, at least for me, basically being something that you tend to kind of think of when you think about how to build a company and how to kind of think about the battles ahead, basically, whilst trying to kind of win a war. Sorry, it's really dark.
Well, no, I was going to say, when Napoleon comes back from the dead and you have him on your talk show, you can learn right there and ask him from there. So
that's great.
Yeah, I'll be like, how did you do that at the Moravian Fields? That's amazing. Yeah.
All right. So that does it for another episode of the Modern Hotelier. This is where, Richard, you get to let people know how they can connect with you, how they can find out more about Mews. So plug away.
So Mews.com. So MEWS, really confusingly, not MUSE. But I'm sure Mews.com, the Mews, the other one is a fine site. But
Right.
if you want to get in touch with us, it's MEWS.com. And then I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. We're probably the most annoying company to ever follow on LinkedIn. But you can get in touch there, or just Richard at Mews if you just want to randomly scream at me via email.
Great. Well, that does it for another episode of the Modern Hotelier, the most engaged podcast in hospitality. Whether you're listening or watching, we thank you, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
You made it to the end of the Modern Hotelier. Thanks for listening. The Modern Hotelier is produced by Make More Media. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're listening on YouTube, or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you know a guest or sponsor that would be a good fit, feel free to email us at hello@themodernhotelier.com. If you'd like to get some Modern Hotelier merch, click the merch button on modernhotelier.com or click the link below. Thanks and have a great day.